So everyone, really excited to be with you today and to have this opportunity to connect and talk with you about MASSP's Path to Leadership program. MASSP has been partnering with Michigan Virtual on this program for a number of years. And we're not just going to focus on that because I think the first thing we need to explore really is, the thought of going into administration. There's many different ways that you can take to kind of get to your end goal. And so we're just going to kind of explore that as well. The great thing about the Path to Leadership program itself, you'll see our tagline, it's created by principals for principals. And we really mean that. All of these courses were actually written by practicing administrators. So that really makes it authentic and really allows it to be kind of a living and breathing program that is routinely updated as changes happen in the education system. I will be watching the chat, and I know that we also have Ann from Michigan Virtual with us who will help me keep an eye on the chat as well. I'm happy to take questions as we go, and I will pause periodically just to check and see where you are. So if I have not met you before, my name is Wendy Zdeb, and I'm the Executive Director at the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals. So when we say secondary school, we mean middle schools and high schools. However, although MASSP is the creator of the Path to Leadership program, we also have a significant number of people who become elementary certified going through this program. So although it's secondary school principals, you get your K-12 administrator certificate by completing. So you'll notice that I also included Tammy Jackson's name on this slide. Tammy Jackson is an MASSP employee who oversees the Path to Leadership program. So if you have any questions following this presentation, Tammy is the person who's probably going to work with you and help you to get set up with the program or answer any questions that you might have. So before I leave the screen, you might want to take a quick screenshot of that. She will be a great contact for you moving forward.
Wendy, I'll just mention too that if people can use the raise your hand function, that it'll be easier to identify who has a question if it's not in the chat.
Awesome. That'd be great too. Thanks. All right. So if we're thinking about certification in general, like who needs to be certified, what does that look like? Do I possess the qualities? Who needs certification? How do I get certified? All of those questions are things that we're going to cover during this time that we have together today. And really, when we look at that first part, do I possess the qualities? That's really your first question. A lot of us were taught right when we, became teachers, you need to start a master's program as quickly as possible. I know when I became a teacher, my mentor told me that. She said, you want to try to get yourself into a master's degree program as quickly as possible. Why is that? Her idea was, you want to get up into the next rung on the pay scale as quickly as possible. So for me at that point, I was only 23 years old. I really don't know that I knew I wanted to be an administrator at that point. So as a matter of fact, I started a master's degree in counseling. And after completing 2 or 3 courses in my counseling master's, I thought, ooh, I don't know if this is for me. And then I started looking into a master's in social work. And after looking into that program more, I kind of thought, I don't really think that's what I want to do either. So eventually I came to understand that maybe administration was something that I'd be interested in. So I do think it's important that you really think about, what is it that you want to do ultimately in your career, but what, qualities that you personally may possess that might make you successful in administration? And is that something that you really want to do? So let's say that you've already come to that conclusion. Yep, administration is your interest. What degree or certification is required? Who needs certification? And then ultimately, how do you get certified? So the first thing as we're kind of processing about that, think about a leader that you have admired. So many of us in our careers have, really had a lot of different influences on us. And when we think about a leader that you've admired, it doesn't have to be a building principal. Obviously, a leader could be a coach that you've really admired, or maybe a teacher leader or a colleague. So could you just pop in the chat? Think about a leader that you've admired and just one word that describes a quality that that leader possessed. I love the variety of things that I'm seeing today. Authentic, caring, a listener, compassionate, understanding. Someone earlier put in problem solver. All of those things are great characteristics that I'm sure all of us would love to possess. Patience is definitely one that we need as well. Mutual respect, consistency. So all of those things are great words when you're thinking about qualities that describe a leader. And I'm sure you can already recognize that when we think about those words, there's some things in there that are pretty challenging. And if we are examining our own personal qualities, what are some things in those that would be challenges for us? So if you're looking at those and thinking, man, a lot of people put a good listener, and listening isn't necessarily my greatest strength. I like to act. What are some things maybe that you're looking at in there that might be even a challenge for you? So I'm going to have a little video for you. One of the things that I think is important to understand is that when we're thinking about the role of the principal, sometimes people kind of maybe have a misunderstanding about what exactly that job looks like. We may have some preconceived notions, but ultimately, what is the role of the principal? Oh, I knew this was going to happen. I tested this video like 3 times, people. I just had a feeling it wasn't going to work. I will try to be able to get that back for you at the end. One of the things that Michael Fullen talks about in this video that's really interesting is he really talks about the fact that people kind of go into the principalship thinking that they can make this larger impact, and definitely that was something that attracted me. You think about your classroom, and you think about, in my case as a high school teacher, the ability to impact 6 hours a day, 30 students in each class, sometimes 35. That's a large influence, but I know that when I was a teacher, I was also a coach. So I had all of those students that I was able to influence. I was also a class sponsor. I had those students that I was able to influence. But ultimately, when you go into administration, you think about the fact that you have the ability to impact the entire building. So in my case, that was 1,800 students on a regular basis. So that might be something that attracts you kind of to make that leap out of your classroom and into the role of principal. But one of the things that you really have to think about is what makes the biggest influence? What causes a principal to be able to influence not just the 1,800 students that might be in the building, but also, most importantly, all of the teachers and all of the employees in the building? So when we think about that, we have to be thinking about the fact that as a principal, you don't have the time in the day, in my case, to meet with 125 employees regularly, to talk to them about their performance, to help coach them up. The biggest influence that you can have is to create a collaborative atmosphere where people want to be invested and make decisions and be part of the process. It's really easy to sit back and talk about things that you think should have been done, or things you would rather have the building be focused on. But it's a lot better to be part of the solution than to just be part of the problem by contributing to maybe negativity in the staff lounge. So your greatest ability to influence as an administrator is to really work to create a collaborative and productive environment with your staff where they feel empowered to take on the challenges that teaching presents. I'm sure many of you would acknowledge that, being a administrator is always challenging, but during a pandemic, it kicks it up to a whole different level. And there's no doubt that if you are sitting here right now, which is really exciting to me, actually, that we have so many people on this session that would even consider going into administration, because there's never been a more challenging time to take on the role of administrator. I see an MASSP colleague has popped this into the chat, so I'm going to play this video for you.
a lot about the role of the principal over the last 20 years. There are two mistakes that people make when they're defining the role or they're passing policies. One is that they expect them to solve the problem. So this is really giving too much leeway to the principal and basically expecting the principal as hero to carry the day because they have the autonomy. Change doesn't happen that way. There's no hero image that that brings about any kind of change that lasts. The other end of the continuum that's also a mistake is the move towards micromanagement. A principal doing one-on-one and trying to improve the human capital, I guess I'll call it, of the staff, it never adds up. You don't have enough time. But if you do what we're finding works, which is the principal is working through the leadership of others, using the group to change the group. So the principal's main impact is when they create a collaborative group that they themselves are learners within that group. So the role of the principal is to create those conditions where the collaboration is serious, it's focused, it's specific. Also, it turns out that we don't want principals, even if they're that collaborative, to work in isolation within a school. The whole system reform again requires that principals, to a certain extent, be what I would call system players. I don't mean they should worry about running the whole system every time they get up in the morning, but what they should do is say, what happens in other schools, of my peers, other schools, is important for me and for them. I'm going to call that as a principal as system player. And when you combine the internal development of the school and the external participation as a system player doing improvement work, and you get the balance right, you really get the big picture and the small picture being addressed in a great integrated way.
So when we think about principal as systems player, that is such a critical role because we really want to be thinking about, your ability to influence on a larger scale. When we also think about some of those leadership qualities, what are the challenging things that happen? Of course, we're going to be dealing with challenging students. Unfortunately, a lot of the time that the principal spends is dealing with about 10% of the student population on a regular basis on that more one-on-one ability to look for teachable moments and help turn things around. We also are going to get those difficult parents. And, many cases, it is a 2 a.m. email on a Sunday, and you wake up to your inbox on Monday with, a number of issues that parents have had over the weekend that they want to bring to your attention. And then, of course, skeptical teachers. I know that when I began my career in administration, I was pretty young. And you walk into a veteran teaching staff that's like, what does this person have to offer? And what is it that they're going to expect or want from me? So there's certainly some negative sides when you think about the role of an administrator. And although I think many of us who have been in administration for a long time like to focus on the positives and kind of think about these opportunities as teachable moments and relationship builders, I think we also do have to recognize that there's definitely lonely times at the top and that there are times when you wonder, why did I get myself in this situation? Or even question, may it have been better to just stay in the classroom and, be able to really enjoy my students on a daily basis. Ultimately, I think that we always come back to the fact that there are many more good days than bad. And we have such an opportunity to be able to form relationships that are positive, and that, in most cases, the interactions we have on a regular basis are actually good ones. So when we're also thinking about kind of some of those key skills that we have in terms of integrity and leadership qualities, we always want to be thinking about truthfulness, a strong moral compass, and also just a transparency about what are our beliefs. You have to be really crystal clear going into administration to think about what is it that I believe are key non-negotiables when it comes to education and when it comes to working with students. One thing I frequently hear educators say is, students have to come first. Do we live that on a daily basis? Is that something that if somebody saw the way that we behave, not what we say, but the way that we behave, do they see that students come first? A thing that I quickly realized in administration as well is that we can't just always be talking about students coming first. It really needs to be people coming first. It can be really challenging in a busy day to get in the moment with people and to listen and to be able to make sure that you understand what it is that they need. In most cases, I would find as an administrator, people would come in my office and I would want to get into problem solving mode immediately. But you know what? Most people just want you to listen. They actually don't want you to solve the problem. So some of those counseling classes that I took early on, I told you that I started a master's degree in counseling before administration. I quickly learned that we actually need those skills as well. You really have to be a good listener. Taking on that opportunity to listen to what people's issues are and just repeat back to them, you know? So Angel, I heard you say that you're concerned about X, Y, and Z. Is there something you'd like me to do about that? And many times I hear people say, no, I honestly just wanted somebody to listen to me. Okay, I've done that. And they walked out of the office feeling better just because somebody took the time to listen. So there's a lot of things that we really need to be thinking about in that skill set for sure. When we think about, what does research tell us? There has been a lot of research in terms of what people look at for a quality administrator. Trusted to be caring, providing accurate information. People need to know that when they ask you something, that you're going to provide information that's accurate. One thing I've kind of learned is that if you don't know the answer to a question someone's asking you, it is a perfectly acceptable answer to say, you know what, I don't know, but I'm going to look into that and get back with you. The important thing is that you actually take the time to look into it and that you get back with them. I think one of the challenges as an administrator is you many times are asked questions by people in the hallway. And so you don't have a piece of paper with you or an ability to write something down. So I would never hesitate because I know that, in the time I'm walking around the building, it might be the lunch hour. Someone comes up to me when I'm busy and I might forget that they asked me that question. So if I didn't have an ability to write it down, which typically I really would walk around the building with a steno pad in my hand or with my phone and I would record messages to myself. But if you don't have, either one of those tools, don't hesitate to say to people, hey, would you mind sending me an email about that just to make sure that I answer it when I get back to my desk? That's a perfectly acceptable prompt for yourself. So making sure that you provide accurate information and also respond promptly is important. Handle resources responsibly. One of the things that you do have some control over as a building administrator is your building budget. It might be incredibly limited, of course, depending on where you are as a school district and how much autonomy that the school district provides that building administrator. I've worked in 3 different school districts in my time, and I could tell you that there were drastically different measures for how funds were distributed. Some school districts give a building administrator a very limited pot of money to control. And in other school districts, they give quite a bit to the building and allow you to parcel it out, perhaps by department. So regardless of how much or how little funding you have, I think it's really important that you have a team of teachers with you to look at budget, talk about budget, and be really transparent about how all those funds are given out and how money is being utilized. It definitely will build trust with your teaching staff. Admit mistakes. You are going to make mistakes, and it doesn't matter what role you play. You're going to make a decision maybe that wasn't the best or one that you wish you had looked at differently. If that ever happens, there's nothing wrong with admitting that you made that mistake and saying, I've learned from this. People really do respect people that admit they've made a mistake, and especially when they say, I should have handled this differently. In the future, this is what I plan to do. Have consequences for unethical behavior. One of the things that I know is that we as administrators, we want to cater to the best teachers in our building, and we want to hold everybody to that standard. The last people you want to make upset in your building are those that go above and beyond and that are really on board and are positive people in the building. But something that can quickly turn your positive people into negative people is if they see that things are happening in the building and it's not being addressed. They tend to get really frustrated with that situation. So if we see unethical behavior happening as an administrator, we have to address it. Unfortunately, we may be addressing these situations and the rest of the teachers don't know we're addressing it. And so that can be kind of a frustrating situation. Very similar to when we're disciplining a student and we have 2 students involved in a situation and the other parent will call and say, I want to know what happened to that other child. The first thing we have to say as an administrator is, I'm sorry, but I can't share with you the discipline of another student. It's the exact same thing with a staff member. You know, if I am dealing with a situation with a staff member who maybe has, every single time we have professional development, they're absent. I might be handling that situation, but I certainly can't let the rest of the staff know that and tell them that. So there has to be a little bit of trust. But in my experience, when a staff member has a situation that needs to be addressed, that word tends to get out in the teaching staff because they typically have said to a friend of theirs, oh, the administrators called me in about X or Y, but you can't be the one to share that information. Performing their responsibilities, what are the responsibilities of an administrator? What are those expectations, and are they being done? I can tell you that there's, no doubt in my mind that everybody knows when an administrator was supposed to be an event or supposed to be handling something and it doesn't happen. There's just a natural expectation that they're going to perform certain responsibilities and to be there when needed. So I think there's no doubt that you are somebody who's highly visible in your school community, and it just is that way. So you need to be making sure that on a regular basis, things are being taken care of the way that they need to. One of the things that didn't seem to make the list here, but I certainly recognize as a longtime building administrator, is that one of the number one responsibilities is to take things off teachers' plate and to make sure that they have the ability to be successful in their work. So if there's some type of form or paperwork that has to be completed that could be completed by somebody else, I would certainly find a way to make that happen. Another thing that we need to be thinking about is limiting disruptions to the classroom. Nothing is more frustrating to a teacher who's in the middle of a really great lesson than all of a sudden there's an announcement in the middle of their class period or a schedule change that they didn't have prior notice about. So just making sure that there are not things that add stress to the teacher that actually relieve stress. I think that's part of our role as building administrator. Before I go on to the next slide, I do want to just pause and be mindful of questions. So if I've said anything thus far that you have a question about, as Ann indicated, you have the ability to raise your hand or you could post those in the chat. So I'll just wait for a second and see if anyone has a question about something I've already addressed.
I have a question.
Yes. Fantastic. Hi, Teresa.
Hi, I'm from Muskegon, Michigan, and my thing I feel like I would struggle with right now. I am an instructional coach, and this is my first year, but I would like to go that route of administrator, and so with this year being my first year as a coach, I'm seeing a lot of interesting things from teachers, and one of those things is like unprofessionalism. And so like one of the bullets says have consequences for unethical behavior. I'm just wondering like how do you handle those moments of, where there's not professionalism?
That's a great question. So could I ask you, Teresa, so how many years were you a teacher before entering your role as an instructional coach?
13.
So I remember that kind of that making that move. And in your case, although you're not moving straight into administration, you've made a move outside of your classroom to a role that allows you to interface with many classrooms in the building and in the district. And I know that one of the most surprising things to me was that people didn't do things the same way that I did them. I was like amazed sometimes. I mean, it seems really naive now, but I remember thinking, well, don't we all do this? Don't we all post the objective? Don't we all come prepared? Don't we all do whatever it might be? I mean, one of the first times I was doing a teacher observation in a classroom, I remember that a teacher actually passed out paper in the classroom, passed out like 5 different sheets, and then passed around a stapler and ask the kids to staple them back in. It took a half hour of instructional time, and I was floored by that. So although that's a very small example and not one that would be necessarily unethical behavior, it just surprised me. And there were many things that happened like that. So I can imagine in your role, especially because you're another colleague. And so, teachers might feel even more comfortable around you. And so you might be seeing things that if an administrator was in the classroom, maybe they wouldn't do. And I would also imagine that with the stress of COVID-19 and, the stress that people are under, maybe they're even making some different decisions that they wouldn't even make during a normal quote unquote school year. So those are going to be challenges that we certainly have to address. One of the best ways I've found to address challenges like that is to ask people questions. So if we see something that's happening, like the example that I gave, I might follow up with the teacher and say, do you feel like you have enough instructional time during an hour to get everything in that you need to teach? Most teachers are going to say, no, I never have enough time, right? I'm going to say, as I was watching you today, I noticed that we had 30 minutes of time where we were passing around a paper and a stapler. And the teacher is going to say, are you kidding me? It took 30 minutes? Yeah. Well, I think I can help you to recoup some of your instructional time. I'd like to partner with you so that I can help you to kind of think about structures. Would that be helpful to you? So I think if you see something that isn't the greatest, rather than coming at it from this is unethical, this is a problem, I think if we try to form it in the form of a question, it allows us to address it and bring it to that person's attention, but in a way that's hopefully maybe non-threatening. Now, in your role as instructional coach, it's definitely a tenuous position because you're going to want to be careful about betraying the trust of the teachers' classrooms that you're in. But obviously, if you see something that's truly unethical, like someone left the students unattended or, something that was going to be a safety issue, that'd be something that you definitely have to let the building administrator be aware of. So hopefully that just gives you a little bit of an answer on that, but that's definitely a situation that you're going to encounter even more as an administrator.
Thank you.
Okay, so I see Marcus asked a question as well. What do you do when you address the staff member and they go into the teacher's lounge and completely misinterpret not only the issue that got them called into the office, but also your response to it? When is it appropriate to set the record straight for the staff? Marcus, unfortunately, that is something that happens. What I've also found is that teachers know what's really going on. So if someone comes in the classroom and say, I got called in about X and Y and blah, 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 chances are the other teachers listening to that situation are thinking to themselves, is that really what's happening? I think people tend to kind of be able to see through things, and have a better understanding of what's really going on. If they really believe something that this teacher has said is true, then you're likely to get a visit by a union rep. At that point, I think it's appropriate to, deal with the issue and ask the union rep, hey, if this is being said, would you mind mediating a conversation with this teacher? And then you have a witness in the room. The other thing that you may need to consider in the future is if you know that that person has gone and made a comment that's, completely not accurate as to what the conversation looked like, don't meet with that person again without having the union rep present. I learned that early on. When I was a teacher, I was a union rep. So I don't look at a union rep as being an enemy. I would call that person in with the teacher and say, Angel, I'm meeting with you today to talk about X. And I've invited Shelley, who's the union president, to be with us today. I just want to be able to make sure that we can problem solve on this together and to be able to resolve it. And that way, it really allows you to have that other person in the room with you and to work through things, hopefully in a collaborative manner, and then kind of head off the potential of something happening that wasn't exactly as it was portrayed during the situation. So Marcus, I hope I helped you with that one. So when we're thinking about kind of those qualities that we want to possess as an administrator, you do have to have the ability to make difficult decisions. And although you're going to be making difficult decisions, the thing I think is most important is that you don't make those decisions in isolation. You know, I was very fortunate in my time as an administrator. When I got my first assistant principal position, I had a seasoned veteran principal who was the building administrator. And then I had another colleague that was the other assistant principal who also had a great deal of experience. So I was able to kind of draw on things with them, have those people to bounce things off of. But what I also quickly realized is that if you're going to make a difficult decision, you need to include teachers in that solution. And not only teachers, but to open it up to whoever is going to be impacted by that decision. So if you're making a decision about dress code, who's going to be impacted? The students. So we want to have a group of students involved in that decision. And that way, if other kids are complaining about the decision, the other students can be able to say, hey, here's why that decision is made. And we had a part in coming to that conclusion. If it is a decision about, let's say, a communication system, a list serve for parents, we want to have a committee that has parents on it. So whenever you're making a difficult decision, you want to involve other people to help you come to a conclusion that's going to solve it for everyone to the best of your ability. You do need to be able to have thick skin and shoulder criticism. There is absolutely no doubt that you are going to have every decision you made. And when I say every decision, right down to the outfit you chose on a given day is going to be noticed and sometimes, unfortunately, criticized. I can tell you, as a high school administrator all of my career, I would stand in the hallway every day during passing time or at lunch, and I would routinely have female students come up and critique my outfit. Luckily, I had thick skin and could take that criticism or feedback from them. Most of the time it was, hey, I like those shoes, but occasionally it was like, that just doesn't work. And I really actually miss those opportunities to engage with students on a regular basis and get that feedback from them. But you're definitely going to have times where you make a decision. And as I noted before, if you don't make the greatest decision, it's being willing to admit that and move on from it. You also have to be strong at times when other people are weak. And when I use the word weak, that might sound like a strong word. But for example, one day I would routinely, as a high school principal, report to the building somewhere around 6 a.m. I always enjoyed that time before the building really woke up to kind of have like a half hour or an hour of peace, to kind of get myself together and plan for the day. And one morning, I was sitting at my desk and just kind of making my to-do list, and the school liaison walked in at 7:30. And I knew that something had to be wrong because she typically would not be walking into my office at that time. And she let me know that a student had committed suicide. So when something like that happens, you have to immediately jump into, kind of crisis mode and think through all of the different steps that need to happen. So when I say you have to be strong when others are weak, I had a moment literally to sit there and cry for a second because I happen to know the student pretty well and to kind of like, woof, think about all of the things that that family was going through. But pretty quickly, I had to get myself together and I had to think about, activating the critical incidents team in our building and all of the different things that were going to need to happen and who I was going to have to meet with and calling the superintendent and as you can imagine. So there are times where you just have to be a leader and it's so hard to just suck it up and like move on and take things seriously. But you have to do that because that's what's in the best interest of your school and community. And it can be such a hard thing to do when you personally are feeling very emotional about something. The other thing is that you really do have to be a hard worker. You have to be, and I'm not saying that you have to be at work 24/7, because I don't think that that's really the best example for your teaching staff. You need to be a person who understands self-care as well. You need to be a person that, whatever your form of self-care is, if it's working out, if it's, making sure that you're getting enough sleep, if it's making sure you're getting enough water, whatever it might be, there's a lot of different forms of self-care. But you do have to have a very solid work ethic where people see that you have a high level of expectation for yourself and that you live it on a regular basis. You do have to have passion. I mean, really, this is the most important thing. I mean, the bottom line is I can tell you that whether it was as a classroom teacher, whether it was as a coach, assistant principal, or now as executive director of the Principals Association, I can tell you that there have been very few days in my career that I have not woken up excited to go to work. And when I say that there's been very few, because there were some tough days as a principal that I had to go to work and I knew I was going to have a stressful day or a tough day in front of me. But you have to have a passion for it. And that's what drives you. Every day you find something to get excited about and look forward to. So you have to be that person that can, really kind of dig down deep and regenerate some positivity, even when it's the week before spring break and everybody's crabby. You have to find that passion. So I've got another little video for you, and I'm going to hope this clip works. It looks like this one's going to. In this one, this gentleman kind of outlines his school experience, which wasn't always positive.
Hi, my name is Joshua Spears, speaker and author, and it's so awesome to get to spend just a few minutes with you guys today. And as I go all over and I tell stories about my life and do my programs and my presentations, try to help people unleash their potential and enjoy the purpose in what they're doing, many times I share my story. And see, I grew up in a very abusive home, and I had a lot of problems with bullies in school, and this resulted in a whole bunch of issues for every school that I went to. And I was expelled from 5 different schools. And I remember when I first started being a professional speaker, I used to think that I was so unique and that this was so bad. And well, it was very difficult and challenging, as I'm sure you know. There are all kinds of students and all kinds of people with these exact same challenges. And I could not really tell my story without talking about the role that educators played in my life. See, when I was doing all the nasty things that I did in schools to get kicked out, I mean, there was always 2 schools of thought. One school of thought was, we got to get this kid out of here because he's disrupting the educational environment for everyone else. And that makes sense. I get it. I understand that. There was another group of people who were always trying to help me, always trying to go to the next level, always trying to do whatever needed to be done to help me. And during that season of my life, I really can honestly tell you that I really didn't want to be in this school. I had faced rejection at home. I faced rejection from my peers. And so for me, getting out of that environment and going back home, being suspended, was really actually what I was looking for, unfortunately. And the thing about it is they all had so many different things in common. But one thing, I remember one time I said to one of them, I said to Mrs. Taylor, I said, why are you being so nice to me? And she said, well, Josh, I see something special in you. And you know what's really interesting about that story is I got a chance just a couple of weeks ago to hear her tell my wife and kids that same story. That was pretty cool. Because the thing about it is she was investing in me and pouring into my life. And, you know, a good legacy is basically sowing seeds that you might never see grow. And so she worked on me. And then she passed me off to the next person that worked on me. And they did all of these things to try to help me. And so many times throughout the course of their time with me, they probably didn't see the progress, but yet they kept digging in. They kept pushing further to try to help me. It was also real exciting as Mr. Snary, who was one of my other elementary school teachers, last summer I got a chance to introduce him to my family. And the thing about it is these people may not realize is that my wife and my kids wouldn't have the life that they have. I wouldn't be the man I am today without the work that those people did. They're out there sewing. And the same for you. There are probably students in your room right now. You're thinking, you know what? I have a student who reminds me of Josh. I know exactly what that's like. My challenge to you guys is there's probably a lot of pressure to perform, and you have to have certain expectations in your classrooms, in your schools, and I understand that. But ultimately, what can you do to learn and to grow and to challenge yourself to grow and to become more and more effective at trying to go after the hard ones, go after those kids that are the ones that are the most frustrating? Because I'll tell you, as I talk to many of these teachers and I keep my relationship strong with them even today, is that what I find from them is that oftentimes they tell me that students like me define their legacy as a teacher because they were out there sowing seeds, putting the work in. And here I am. So as you go through this training, I appreciate what you guys do. I just love the fact that you're here trying to learn, trying to get better at what you do. And you are building the next generation. You are making a huge difference in people's lives. You might not always see it grow. If there's ever anything I can do for you, you can reach out to me on my website, joshuaspears.com. I have all kinds of interesting videos and stuff on there. But it's been so awesome spending some time with you guys. And I hope you have an awesome day. Hi, my
So let's think
Hi,
about
my name is Joshua Spears, speaker and
let's think about what Joshua Spears just shared. And the fact that, you know, sometimes we feel like those really challenging students, the answer is to get them out. And what he really shared is the people that made a significant impact on his life are the people who tried to keep him in. And I think that's really been a shift, especially in the last 5 years or so in public education. I know that when I first became an assistant principal, it was made pretty plain to me that the idea was if you want the teachers to be on your side as the new administrator in the building, you needed to be very strict and follow through on student discipline. And I'm not saying that that has changed. I think people still want you to follow through on student discipline, but what student discipline looks like has changed significantly with the advent of looking at restorative practices and helping students to think about the why of their behavior, and also working with teachers on, you know, how do we keep kids in the classroom and build relationships? That's a pretty significant change, instead of just setting rules in the classroom and finding ways to remove students from instruction. So those are going to be kind of some different opportunities that you have as an administrator. And one of the things that I would ask you to think about is, if you were the new assistant principal or principal in a building, and students look back after they had graduated, like Mitch Album did this morning, or someone that graduates and 10 years later, they look back at their experience with you, is it going to be positive or is it going to be a negative? Are they going to remember all the teachable moments and the times that you were patient with them and helped them to work through a problem? Or are they going to remember you for being that person that kicked them out for 10 days? So that's kind of the challenge that you're going to face. Now, for those of you who are still with me after all of this time of kind of talking about what are those key characteristics, do I even want to go into a school administration? I want to talk to you a little bit about the credentials that are required. You have your K-12, you know, teaching certificate, or it might be 712, you know, whatever your endorsement area is. If you want to be a school administrator, you have to get a school administrator certificate. And that gives you a pre-K through 12 endorsement. So you don't get just an elementary principal endorsement or just a secondary. You will be certified pre-K through 12. That also allows you to go into central office administration. It's the same certificate. You might get a central office endorsement, but it's not required currently in the state of Michigan that you have one. So who has to have an administrator certificate? There are some school districts that have like a dean of students position, for example, or an administrative intern. Essentially, you have to have your certification. Any person who's employed as a school administrator or in a position with the primary responsibility to administer instructional programs. So I mentioned a dean of students. It can be possible that a district has a dean of students position where that individual is strictly processing discipline. They are not observing and evaluating teachers. They are not running department meetings. They are not working on curriculum work at all. That person might not need a certificate. In most cases, if the title is assistant principal, that means that you're going to have some instructional responsibilities, and therefore you have to have your K-12 administrator certificate. Obviously, if you're working in central office and you're the curriculum director, or you're the assistant superintendent of instruction, you would have to have a K-12 administrator certificate because you're obviously administering or overseeing instructional programs. So all of those people would need to do that. What's the difference when we talk about MASSP's alternate route to administrator certification versus a traditional master's in instructional leadership? Okay. If you go to Michigan State University and you enter in the instructional educational leadership program, it will take you most likely somewhere between 2 and 4 years to complete. And obviously, that's going to come at a pretty significant price tag per credit hour. When you graduate with your degree in educational leadership, you will apply for your administrator certificate. MDE has to approve that application, and then you're issued your certificate. It's the exact same process in MASSP's alternate route to administrator certification. You will complete an MDE approved curriculum that is 1 year's time, sometimes a year and a half, depending on if you are doing the internship as well. But it's at a third the cost generally of a university master's program. And MASSP's program is also all online. So the difference here, you're out of both of these, the traditional route and the alternative route, you're going to walk out with your K-12 administrator certificate. But the difference is in the traditional route, you have a master's degree. In the alternative route, you don't have a master's degree, but you have the certificate. So if your school district has you jump up on the pay scale when you get your master's, you wouldn't get that through the alternative route. So that's something I want to point out to you. What I find is that the majority of people in MASSP's program, they usually have a master's degree in something else. Like they have a master's in counseling or a master's in the art of teaching. And then they're like, man, I'm really interested in building administration. Then they get their K-12 administrator certificate through our program. That's the majority of people that we see. Our program is approved by the Department of Education and it is regularly reviewed. This program began in 2016. We are on cohort 58. So if you join this program, you are definitely not a guinea pig. This has been tried and true. And we've been able to successfully administer this program for many years. And we have, tons of people who have gone on to get their administrator certificate and then go on to be successful administrators in school districts all over the state of Michigan. It's 100% online. The courses are asynchronous, meaning that there isn't live instruction being provided. The instructors often post their assignments for the week. They may post a video of themselves providing instruction. They may post chats. There's a lot of different ways that they make it interactive. But the great thing is that for the most part, it allows you to be able to manage your week, think about the work that you have to do, and do it at a time that fits into your lifestyle and your schedule. So we find that people really appreciate the flexibility that the program provides. I already mentioned that it's a significantly lower cost than a university master's program, and why it's significantly less cost. You're not getting the college credit for the classes. When I talk about flexible scheduling, as I mentioned, these are asynchronous. So most instructors will open the course on a Monday and the assignments are due on that Sunday. So you'll have the whole week to say, okay, Wednesday night is the night I set aside to do my schoolwork, whatever it might be. You pay as you go for these classes. Because this is not through a university master's program, we don't have financial aid available. So you register for the class and pay for it throughout the program. Kind of just some other kind of nuts and bolts things. If you currently have a master's degree, as I mentioned, in educational leadership, you would have a master's degree in the art of teaching or a master's in counseling. There may be some exemptions from some of the modules that we offer. Let's say that you took a school law class in a previous program, we wouldn't make you repeat that, for example, okay? If you have a bachelor's degree in teaching, and that's how you got into your job, but you haven't gotten a master's yet, but you have done tons of different leadership positions within your district, we can even look at your experience and consider that as well. So these are the different modules that we have. creating an inclusive culture and environment, visionary leadership for educational change, elements of evaluation and highly effective instruction, improving instructional programs, assessment and learning, creating a safe and orderly environment for student learning, principles of school law, facilitation of school improvement, human resources, and finance. So these are all the different modules that you would go through. And these are, the things that potentially, if you had some overlap in a different program, or let's say that you are the school improvement facilitator for your school. Maybe you don't need to take the school improvement class that we offer. You would have to submit evidence to show us that you have that competency already. So there could be an opportunity for that as we go along. So courses are 6 weeks in length. And then there is a week break, and then you go on to the next course. So we pretty much, keep you moving throughout the program, and we do a personalized IDP. So we start by looking at everyone's transcripts that they send us and what their experiences might be. And then we also work with you to develop your internship as well. So all of that is done collaboratively. And I mentioned Tammy Jackson, my colleague that oversees this program. Tammy would work with you individually to go ahead and walk you through that process. If anyone has a question, we can just unmute you and you can ask.
My question is, with the exclusions, or as you've mentioned, the experience that we have in education, I have experience in education, but also outside of education administratively. So I'm just, how much flexibility, I'm wondering, is available as far as, providing credit for experience?
Well, I gave you the information to contact Tammy, and
Okay.
Tammy will look at whatever transcripts you have. So we have definitely had people like with an MBA or that were attorneys come into the program, for example.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have people, in many different kind of walks of life that have come to wanting to go into administration. So we even have a couple of people that were professional athletes that, wanted to get certified so that they could be athletic administrators. So there's many different people who have come through, and it really is very individualized. So she'll look at your transcripts and also talk to you about what your experience is, and then talk to you about what type of documentation we would need to have.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep, no problem. Anyone else before we head off to the closing keynote?
Hi, Wendy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Josh.
Hi. I just have a question. So I have, my career has mostly been in private education. I went through my master's program and I have my administrative cert, but I was just wondering, is there any advice or anything you could share? I find it difficult to even get an interview for assistant principal jobs. I think maybe it's based because I've only worked in private education as opposed to public education, but are there any steps or things that I could do or someone like me could do to maybe be able to even get that initial interview or something that maybe you look at in that hiring process?
So Josh, I've unfortunately heard this from a number of people, and I know someone who was a public school teacher. His first administrative position was in a charter school as assistant principal, and then he wanted to get back into the public school system, and he had a really difficult time, even though he had been a public school teacher. So I understand, that can be an obstacle. And as you indicated, sometimes it is just getting that initial chance to get somebody to give you a chance to let you come in and interview. And one of the things that I always recommend to people is networking. So many times, you even find out about positions that are going to be posted before they're even posted because you know someone, through word of mouth. So it would be great if you had an opportunity to get involved. I'm not sure if you're more interested in elementary education or in secondary, but if you're a middle or a high school person, joining MASSP and getting to network and meet with other administrators that are in the public schools, I think that would be really beneficial to you. There is an Elementary Principals Association, MASSP, that would provide those same opportunities. I do think it just really helps if you have, people that or that you've had an opportunity to network with. That would definitely be a good way. The other thing is, of course, hoping that you can personalize your cover letter so that you really talk about, why are you looking to make this change out of, the setting that you're in right now into something different, and really outlining that, that might also be helpful to you. So just a couple ideas or thoughts I have.
Great. Thank you so much.
We do
Anyone
need to move on to the ending session. Wendy, would you like people to ask any additional questions to Tammy?
Yes, I shared Tammy's contact information with you. She routinely checks her email. She will be on top of it. You can also go to the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals website and see the Path to Leadership program and all of the supporting documents that go with it as well. There's tons of information for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this session.
Thanks. Looking forward to the closing, everyone.